Good morning. I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Welcome to First Look, Washington Post Live's one-stop shop for news and analysis. We're going to talk about the coronavirus and the Delta variant, but big unemployment numbers came out. And so let's bring in Washington Post White House correspondent Ann Gearan to talk about that and a whole lot more. Ann, welcome back to First Look. Ann, I think you're muted. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And don't
Okay.
worry, I did the same. I made the same mistake a little while back. It's great to see you. The unemployment numbers literally just came out. So if you don't have any insight, that's fine. But let's tell everybody 943,000 jobs created, which is higher than the experts expected. Unemployment rate dropped from 5.9% to 5.4%. You covered the White House. How excited do you think the Biden administration and the president in particular is by these numbers?
Extremely. I mean, there were a lot of high expectations for these jobs numbers. We had a good jobs report in June, and the White House was certainly hoping for another one that they could characterize as blockbuster. This is obviously good news in getting people back to work and pandemic recovery, and it helps to blunt the bad news from the Delta variant. And certainly there will be some problems in these reports, as we've seen before, in terms of exactly who is returning to work and the problems that some employers continue to have in finding enough workers. But from the White House perspective, it's better to have that problem than so many people out of work entirely.
Right. So let's talk about the coronavirus and the fact that we are now in what appears to be a fourth surge. A month ago, President Biden declared that we were close to independence from the coronavirus. And now we are seeing this surge in cases because of the variant. How is the Biden administration responding?
Well, Jonathan, I think we're seeing the Biden administration responding in a way that is starting to look a little bit like the very first months of the Biden administration in total, right? I mean, the president came into office saying that we were in a war and that he expected to be on a wartime footing. And we are seeing now case rates that are on par with the numbers of Americans getting sick in February before vaccinations were widely available. And although, this has been a big blow to the president and his agenda and his plans for, as you say, liberation from the virus, liberation from the pandemic, they are beginning in a variety of ways to return to that kind of wartime footing. The question of what the administration is doing about the pandemic has dominated the news at the White House for 2 weeks now. The daily briefing is, mostly questions about the pandemic and what the administration is going to do about a variety of issues, including the questions of mandating vaccines, what parts of the federal workforce and other aspects that the White House has some direct control over will be required to take vaccines and so forth. And, that obviously a lot of other things they're managing as well, but you just see the amount of time and brain space being devoted to managing what the White House had seen as a receding problem only a couple of months ago, and you really get a picture of how different things are now.
And for lack of a better description, it seems as though the president in particular is taking a more aggressive stance when it comes to dealing with governors. And our colleague Annie Linsky wrote last night that the administration is considering using federal regulatory powers and the threat of withholding federal funds from institutions to push more Americans to get vaccinated. How likely is it that the administration will move forward with this? And what have the early conversations been like?
Yeah, that report from Annie and Tyler Pager indicates that the White House is looking at taking some pretty strong tactics here, right? I mean, we've gone from a approach from the White House that was essentially like talk nicely and urge people to get the vaccine. We have this fabulous tool available. Everybody should go get it. This is, this is within our power to do. To then adding some carrots, paying people to get vaccinated, for example. And now we're really on to sticks. If you don't get vaccinated, here's what could happen to you. And the White House is treading extremely lightly in the sticks portion of this conversation, not least because we already see the political divide between states that are largely Republican. Those are also the places where vaccine resistance is highest. And is now the places where the pandemic is raging the worst. I mean, all these things are overlapping, and President Biden still wants to be the uniter, wants to be the president who brings bipartisanship back to Washington. He doesn't want to unnecessarily alienate the Republican politicians from those states, but you can hear and see the frustration that he's dealing with right now when he goes back to step one in that progression. Look, we have the tools to fix this. Why would people not want to use those tools? And the question of exactly how far he takes the federal mandate is one that I think they have not reached the end of that conversation. We don't know how that ends, but we've seen the beginning of some ways that they are using the federal powers, including requiring federal employees and contractors to be vaccinated or submit to a lot of rigorous and unpleasant testing regimens if they refuse to.
Right. So this discussion about going the federal regulatory route is one instance of the administration being quote unquote aggressive in dealing with this. Also, the president himself has been a little less reticent to take it to those governors who are standing in the way of doing something about the pandemic. I'm thinking of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, Texas Governor Abbott. How likely is it that we're going to see the president continue to go after them, maybe not by name, but certainly by not so well disguised inference?
Yeah, I mean, Biden has been trolling DeSantis really hard this week, and it's funny, and we all know what he's doing here. There's a certain wink aspect to it, but those two states are pulling the country in the wrong direction, and that is the president's message here is that leadership in those states could do a great deal that they're choosing not to do, and certainly in the case of DeSantis in particular, President Biden is being quite clear that he thinks DeSantis is working in the opposite direction. The White House would immediately come back and say, yes, but we still want to try to work with Governor DeSantis. And certainly when the president went to Florida some weeks ago to tour the devastation at Surfside, or talk about the devastation at Surfside, he sat next to Governor DeSantis and worked with him. They praised one another for their response to that disaster. So, I mean, the idea that all hope is lost, I think the White House would say is not right. But on the question of pandemic response in particular, I think, to answer your question directly, it is extremely likely that President Biden will continue to go after Governor DeSantis directly, Governor Abbott as well, but and possibly by name directly, as well as sort of by inference.
One last question for you, and that is, I saw a chart this morning on television about the COVID, the cases in Florida, and the bar, it's like a roller coaster, but now the upswing is higher than it was at the peak at the beginning of this pandemic. Do you know if there are any discussions within the administration about the potentials for lockdowns? There's one thing to say mandate vaccinations or plead with people to get vaccinated or tell people to start wearing masks again. It's another to then say to folks, we need to lock down again. Are there discussions? Do you know?
I don't know the extent of those discussions, but we do know that the White House is looking at all options to respond to the Delta variant, and the potential for other variants beyond, if they can't get ahead of this surge. And there's still time for this surge to crest and then start to ebb. That is actually what other countries saw, India and the UK in particular, when the Delta variant, really tore through those countries. It also ebbed fairly quickly. There's some hope that that will happen here. But yes, the White House is looking at anything and everything if we are still in this kind of terrible situation in some months' time.
All right, and Gearan, as always, we're out of time just when the conversation starts getting good. Thank you very much for coming to First Look. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And I want to apologize for the for the sirens that are going by in this. Let's go to the opinion side of the Washington Post, where we'll find Washington Post columnists Eugene Robinson and Jennifer Rubin. Eugene, Jennifer, welcome back to First Look.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good to be here. Happy Friday.
Thank you. All right. So, Jennifer, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk, before we get to coronavirus, the unemployment numbers. Huge jobs number, 943,000. The unemployment rate fell a half a point from 5.9 to 5.4%. From your perspective, good news, obviously, for the economy. What do you think the Biden administration is thinking about all this?
They probably won't admit it, but I think there's some cartwheels going on during through the halls of the West Wing, because they've been in a bit of a slump for an administration that really has had a high level of competence, very few slips. They've had a little stretch of bad news here. They had, of course, the coronavirus. They've had the slip up with the extension of the eviction moratorium. So it's not been a great news stretch for them. And something like this, which shows that his overall approach of really kind of flooding the zone with resources, aggressively going after the coronavirus, actually does pay off, I am sure is of great solace to them. Now, they will be quick to say, if you get them speaking quietly and off the record, that this really does not account for the last couple of weeks of the month in which the coronavirus and the Delta variant really took off. So they may be a little bit restrained publicly in touting these numbers because what comes one month may be taken away the next. But I got to think this helps them, and it helps them right now as they're in the middle of negotiating the final stretch of the bipartisan infrastructure bill and also the reconciliation package with fellow Democrats. So good news for them at a time they really need it.
And you know what, Gene, actually, that's a very good point that Jennifer raises. For the administration, these numbers could not have come at a better time.
No, that's absolutely right. I noticed that President Biden is now scheduled to come out and speak about these numbers at 10:30 this morning. So when you get this sort of prompt appearance by the president in front of the TV cameras to talk about employment numbers, they're good for the administration. The administration really wants to trumpet them. I'm not sure, Jen, that there's going to be much restraint in the way the Biden administration talks about them, because they, as Jonathan said, they couldn't have come at a better time. And if you get a whole half point drop in the unemployment rate, you get a better than, like 100,000 better than expected jobs number. That you're going to trumpet that to the heavens, and I think that's what we're going to hear from the administration today.
Hey, Gene, do you know, I'm trying to sneak to look to see where the president is going to give these remarks at 10:30. Do you happen to know? Is it going to be in the Rose Garden?
I don't know. I don't know. I just saw the update to the schedule.
All right.
But I didn't notice exactly where it was going to be. So we'll see.
Well, I'm only asking because if it's in the Rose Garden, that leaves a lot of room, Jennifer, for those cartwheels you were talking about. But Gene, I want to stick with you and as move the conversation to the coronavirus pandemic. New York City announced that it'll become the first major American city to require proof of vaccination to enjoy indoor activities, performances, going out to dinner and such. Um, should other cities follow New York's lead here?
Well, I think yes, I think they should. I'm not sure that a lot of other cities will, and let's be honest, this will go over really, really well with some people, and because somehow the virus has become politicized, it will be hated by other people and seen as an assault on their freedom to, I don't know, to have pizza, in the trattoria of their choice, and it's going to be it's going to become an issue of conflict. Maybe less so in New York City, which where I think most people will think it's a good idea, and will think it helps let people get back to something like their normal lives. But I think there are other cities where it wouldn't be as
Mhm.
universally accepted.
Jennifer, do you think what New York City is doing, will it work or will it just further vaccine hesitancy and cause people to rebel against compliance because they feel like their freedoms are being taken away or infringed upon? I'm just going to go on record because I already have. Tough. Your response.
Yeah, I'm in the tough club too. Listen, most people in New York City are already vaccinated, so there's a certain symbolism here. It's a very progressive city, very high numbers of people vaccinated. So I'm not sure it's going to sway too many people. There may be employees, there may be some few holdouts who have said, "Well, I really don't have time to get it, but now that I really have to, okay, I'll go get it." I think what's significant is that we've kind of shifted attention now, in my mind, a very good thing, from imposing restrictions solely on those people who have been vaccinated to really putting some pressure on people who haven't been. And I think that's why the switch in the direction, the guidance on mask wearing came so hard, because those people who got vaccinated felt like, I've already done my part, and now you're
Right.
telling me still have to wear my mask. Now you're telling me I have to go backwards. And so I think the administration is sensitive enough to know that there's a real frustration out there, and that the 60%, now we're up to 70% of adults who are vaccinated, are really in no mood to go back to this. And what about those other people? And so I think the philosophy is both smart. You have to begin to use some sticks along with those carrots, but it's also
Mhm.
politically pretty savvy because the majority of the country is vaccinated. And even in those states like Florida and Texas that you were talking about with Ann, where the governors are very much opposed to this, if you look at the polling out of Florida this week, 62% of Floridians want mask mandates. It's remarkable. So even among red or purple states, this is a pretty popular thing to do. It may not be popular on Fox News or in Republican quarters, but it's a pretty good
Right.
play for the White House, and it may be the only thing left to do.
Gene, I'm just wondering now. So now we talked about what the public sector is doing. Now it's the private sector. We work for a
Yeah,
company that is, we have a vaccine mandate. You want to come back to work, you got to show that you've been vaccinated.
absolutely.
There's a story about 3 employees at CNN who were fired because they came to work unvaccinated. Should the private sector keep moving forward with vaccine and mask mandates as a requirement for people to return to the office?
I think they absolutely should. I mean, I welcomed the Washington Post a vaccine mandate. Sent a note to our publisher applauding the decision. I saw this morning that United Airlines is going to have a vaccine mandate, and there are
Mm.
some companies that are doing it, but Amazon, another huge employer, is not having a mandate, or certainly not yet. So look, I think the private sector can play a hugely constructive role here. by saying, look, we aggregate a lot of people in one space on a given day, and especially with the Delta variant with being so contagious, we really need everybody to be protected and therefore get vaccinated. Period. And I think the at least the experts are telling us that that sort of push does make people go get vaccinated. Every little bit helps, and this is like a big bit because I mean, this is the condition of employment at the Washington Post now, and so that's a big push.
Right, right. Let's switch gears in the time that we have left to talk about the big scandal up in the Empire State. Jennifer, if memory serves, in addition to being a writer, a journalist, you're also a lawyer,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yes.
So,
A recovered lawyer.
right, but still, you went to law school, you've got the degree, so you're a lawyer, whether you're
Yes.
practicing or not. So therefore, how much trouble is Andrew Cuomo in, Governor Cuomo?
Oh, he's in a heap of trouble. And I don't mean just his job. You have 4 district attorneys from 4 different counties in New York investigating for possible criminal prosecution. These are serious, detailed, highly substantiated claims by 11 people. We're not talking about 1 or 2, we're talking about 11 people. And as the state legislature moves towards impeachment, these other investigations are going to go forward as well. And we're talking about assault. We're talking about not just civil claims, but criminal as well. And this is a really ignominious end, not only to his career, but to one of the great political families in America. Our colleague Matt Bai writes about the end, essentially, of this dynasty, the Cuomo family. So this is really, the guy who went from battling COVID to someone who had a few problems because maybe he wasn't being so candid about the nursing home numbers, to a guy who's headed out the door and maybe needs to lawyer up with some criminal defense lawyers. Wow, has his career and his fate turned around. He's in a lot of trouble. He's handled it poorly. He was defensive. He was aggressive. He was attacking the women who had come forward. He did not help himself. And it was quintessential Andrew Cuomo being Andrew Cuomo. And that's why he's in the trouble he's in.
Right, and why he doesn't have any friends anymore long before this. But of course, Gene, we're talking about this because the New York State Attorney General released a damning report about the 11 substantiated allegations of sexual misconduct, harassment against the governor, including, notes from their meeting with the governor and what he had to say about the allegations. The big question now is you've got the entirety of New York State Democratic establishment saying to the Democratic governor of New York, get out, resign, or you will be impeached. I'm just wondering, do you think that Governor Cuomo, given the dynastic nature of that family, his father was governor of New York, the family is synonymous with New York, do you think he'll resign, or will he just, as Joy Reid said last night on her show, thug it out and allow himself to be impeached and removed from office?
Well, Jonathan, first of all, you know more about the Byzantine ins and outs of New York State politics than I do. But it looks right now as if he intends to thug it out. His response to the allegations was categorical and combative, really, and he says he's not going anywhere now. One thing I do know is that if he is impeached, if impeachment is voted by the assembly, apparently at that point he steps aside and the lieutenant governor assumes the powers of the governorship, and that is that's a huge handicap for him as he tries to wage this battle because, once he steps away, I think there's absolutely no way he comes back. Whatever happens with the impeachment, I just don't see. So that is the key. And what I imagine he is doing is trying to work his political allies, if he has them left, in the assembly, trying to keep them from voting impeachment. We'll see how that works out. Again, New York State politics is a black box to me. I really don't understand how Albany works.
Gene, New York State politics is a black box to those who even report on it. They're always finding little corners and things that it didn't know existed. And to your point about the state assembly, right now on the record, a majority of the state assembly has gone on record saying that the governor should resign. But also to your point, if the governor is working the phones behind the scenes to try to whittle that number down, we will soon see how successful he is. Excuse me. I also want to point out, Gene, because you broke the news that that the president of the United States is going to be speaking, delivering remarks on the July jobs report. I do now have a location. It is not the Rose Garden. Those remarks will be delivered in the East Room. And I just want to point out to everyone that there are high ceilings in the East Room, so plenty of room to do cartwheels. And so with that, yes, cartwheels, backflips, whatever the president can manage. Eugene Robinson, Jennifer Rubin. I almost called you Jennifer Hudson.
That's okay. Rubin. I'll take
it. We are out of time. As always, thank you for coming to First Look. Have a great weekend.
You too.
You too.
And thank you for tuning in. Go to WashingtonPostLive.com to register and find out more about our upcoming programs. I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Thank you for watching First Look on Washington Post Live.